All right. I'm going to show you where the quadratic equation came from, or how it is that they came with that quadratic equation. So if you remember, so I'm actually going to start at the end and say the quadratic equation is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all, that's not a good line, all divided by 2a. And this actually comes from completing the square. So you kind of have to have an idea of how completing the square works before we can do that, but that's for a different video, or we'll go over that in class, I guess. Anyway, so we have, let's start with an equation in standard form. So here's step one. We're going to start with ax squared plus bx plus c, and it equals 0. Okay, that's our standard form. That's what it should look like. Our first step is, I guess our second step. We started with the equation. Our second step is divide everything by a. So we're going to divide everything by a, and so that's going to give us x squared, because ax squared divided by a divided by a is 1, plus b over a times x plus c over a is equal to 0. We did divide the 0 by a, but 0 divided by a is still 0. Step 3, we're going to subtract c over a from both sides, and that's going to give us x squared plus b over a x equals negative c over a. Okay, we're just working on this like it's a regular equation. Okay, we can come up here for step 4. Now that we have it in that form, now that we have it in this form, we're going to complete the square. And we complete the square by taking that middle term, the b over a, as it currently is, we divide it by 2, and we square it. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite it. Well, I'm just going to, so we're going to call this complete the square. Complete the square. And we do that by dividing b over a by 2, which actually just gives us b over 2a. And we square that. And so that, and then we have to add that to both sides. So that gives us x squared plus b over a times x plus b squared over 4a squared equals negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. Okay, step 5, simplify the right side, the left side. Okay, so we completed the square, which means our left-hand side is a perfect square trinomial and can be written as x plus b over a, x plus b over 2a squared. And then on the right-hand side, we're just going to leave that as it is right now, but we will simplify that in the next step. And if you want to check that x plus b over 2a squared is the same thing as x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared, you can just multiply that out and verify that that is correct. That is the same. Step 6, we're going to simplify the right side. All right, simplifying the right side, we need a common denominator. So the negative c over a needs to be multiplied by 4a, and that will give me the 4a squared on the denominator. So I'm going to multiply the negative c over a by 4a over 4a, because that's multiplying by 1. Not changing the value, just changing what it looks like. So we end up with x plus b over 2a squared equals negative 4ac over, plus the b squared all over 4a squared. 7, take the square root of each side. Okay, so if we take the square root of each side, I'm going to slide this over because I'm running out of room. Take the square root of each side. On the left-hand side, we are given x plus b over 2a, and that's going to equal the square root of, I'm going to rearrange the order a little bit, b squared minus 4ac over, and then the square root of 4a squared is 2a. Okay, and then step 8, subtract. All right, so I paused this a long time ago, and looks like we were on step 8, subtract. I don't know how far I got with that, but what we want to do is we want to subtract that b over 2a from both sides, and that leaves us with x on the left-hand side and b over 2a, negative b over 2a plus the square root of b squared minus 4ac also over 2a. We have a common denominator, so we can just put those together. I guess we'll just say 9, simplify, and we'll be there. I do need to point out one thing. So x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And the reason that plus or minus is there, and this is just a real quick side note, if we have the square root of 4, we're just looking for two numbers that when we multiply them together, we get 4. Well, that could be 2 and 2, but that could also be negative 2 and negative 2. And so that's why we have that plus or minus, is because we're going to get that square root. We're going to get a positive and a negative version of that square root. And really, we need that because on our parabolas, it crosses the x-axis in two places. If we have two solutions, it's going to cross it in the x-axis in two places. It means y equals 0 at two different places. And so we need that plus or minus to be able to get both of our answers. And there's really a lot more that you could do with this. There's a lot more you could do with this. For example, you could look at the fact that you have a negative b over 2a. And if you remember that from standard form, that's the x component of your vertex. And because your graph is symmetrical, right? You should have an intercept a certain number of units to the left, and to the same number of units to the right, you're going to have your other intercept. And the intercepts, that's what that difference is the plus or minus the b squared minus 4ac over 2a. That tells you how far to the left, and that tells you how far to the right. That's the plus or the minus. Anyway, that's all there is for this one. Just a long, fun video. Try it yourself. See if you can derive the quadratic equation from completing the square, or go back the other way. That one's also entertaining.